Well, good evening and happy Shabbat to one and all. It's our pleasure to be here. We've got Kirk with us this evening. And Kirk, I don't know if you probably didn't. I would have had no reason to see it other than I was just curious this morning for a recap. But did you hear anything about the Trumpster having the show of all shows, the show to end all shows, the mother of all shows on the celebration of the 4th of July?
Yeah, I heard he was going to have one, but we stayed out of it. We didn't watch anything or participate in any way. We're very political.
I didn't either. I did just because I happen to like fireworks. I think fireworks are pretty to look at, and so I did sit on the back of my boat and watch them shoot some fireworks over the intracoastal here in Fort Lauderdale, and it was a pretty sight. And so we're all little boats that were hovering around between us and where they're shooting out the fireworks. But this morning I was curious, because all the Democrats are having a conniption fit that he was politicizing the 4th of July. How could he do that? So un-American of him. The thing that just tickled me no end is that it was a rainy day. And the Trumpster got up and gave his speech, and evidently the teleprompter failed on him. Now, this is the same guy that used to demean Hillary Clinton because she couldn't give a speech without the teleprompter. The teleprompter failed on him, and so he claimed that he knew his speech so well, in his own words, that wasn't a problem. Well, he went a little off script. He made an important point that the U.S. military has always been the greatest in the world, and that particularly we've had command of the air. And that no U.S. serviceman has been killed by a foreign Air Force in over 60 years. And he used the example of the Continental Army and how during the Revolutionary War they took over the airports. I guess so the British couldn't fly their warplanes.
Yeah, of course, yeah. They're Boeings. They're Boac.
Only one problem. Only one problem, of course. The first airplane wasn't invented until the 1900s, and that was in the 1700s. Oh, well. Let's blame the teleprompter. That's what he did. It just frightens me that we have so many people in this country. I was talking this morning. I think the nation is essentially bound into three distinct groups. The Trumpites, the Trump supporters, who are largely conspiratorial and neocons, and they're a menace to themselves and to the world. Then second to them, you have the Bernie supporters, Bernie Sanders, and they're socialists and communists and feel like they're entitled to everything and believe themselves to be enlightened and irrational, and they couldn't reason themselves into a new pair of sneakers. And then you have about a third of the people that aren't quite as religious wackos. They're not quite as political. They're not nearly as entitled in their thinking. They're not conspiratorial. Just average Joe and Janes. And it's among that group that at least we have the hope of this message resonating. The second thing I wanted to bring up is I was searching the news, as I love to do, and one of the feature stories was about the DNA of the Philistines. Today's people that quote to be the Philistines, the quote-unquote Palestinians, or the Mythistinians, as I like to call them, they're all Arab. They're all from various Arabian tribes. Well, Yahowah specifically said that he brought the Philistines in from Crete. So now it was released this week that they found, for the first time, graves in around the 5 Philistine cities, and they've been able to trace the DNA. So where do you think the DNA of the Philistines traces to?
And you said Yahweh said Crete, right?
That was what Yahweh says. But what does he know about these things? What do you think his DNA actually reveals?
Yeah.
You're going with Crete again?
I'm going to
so that's your final answer?
I'm going to take my shot on that. Mm-hmm.
Take your shot on Crete. Crete is Crete.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's a small thing among big things, but come on. You've got a group of people that claim to be descended from the Philistines, and that Palestine is theirs, and they're all Arabs, and come to find out that the DNA of the Philistines is from Crete.
Yeah.
And then on top of all that, we find out that Yahweh says specifically, I'm going to bring them from Crete.
But, Craig, that's not a small thing.
I think what must have happened, though, is he read the DNA report, and his testimony was altered, and it was just recently edited to show Crete that somehow he cheated and knew this in advance.
That's not fair.
Or maybe not. We've talked a lot about sexual misconduct in the U.S. military. There's a report out this week that sexual misconduct in the two academies that I should report on, the United States Coast Guard Academy, for example, reached an all-time low, and not low in the sense of frequency, low in the sense of morality. 45% of all female cadets, as they call them cadets in the Coast Guard Academy, and 17% of the males said they experienced sexual harassment this past year. Was an increase over 50% from the previous year. All the military academies said, don't make sexual misconduct or any misconduct or illegal act in the military subject to civil courts. No, keep them in military courts. We'll take care of this. We'll resolve this issue. Well, since they made that request, sexual misconduct has continued to skyrocket to the point that, as a woman, the least safe place for you to be is in the U.S. military as it relates to sexual mistreatment. And it's not by a foreign enemy. It's by the enemy that we know from within. It's by our own troops. And that the likelihood of the perpetrator being prosecuted is 1%. In West Point, the U.S. military academy, 747 West Point cadets reported unwanted sexual conduct last year alone. 747. It is indicative of the least free, most dishonest entity in the United States. I don't know if you've heard it, probably not. I wouldn't have heard of it if I didn't have a nincompoop send me an email. A woman who will go nameless sent me an email this morning screaming in all capital letters with exclamation points galore that we had on this 4th of July, we had to watch, it's a much watch to watch this documentary on the USS Liberty. So, I brought it up. And you bring it up, and it's a couple of right-wing, neocon, patriotic, anti-Semite Christians. That was probably verbose and redundant. But these evangelical Christians have created this documentary, what they're not yet finished with, but we got a sneak preview that they wanted on Independence Day to present because they had found something amazing. That the Six-Day War, and indeed the great movement that is the most destructive of our time, is the Jews, these Zionists, want to control the world. That their game is to invade and control Egypt, to invade and control Jordan, to invade and control Syria. And that's the very reason for the mess that the world's in today, is that is their ambition. But you didn't know that.
No, the likelihood is zero. But wow.
So the United States did back then what the United States seems to be really good at, putting its nose where it don't belong. And you remember the Liberty ships from World War II?
Oh, yeah.
Floating death traps, right?
Pretty much. Yeah.
They were so poorly made, so quickly and hastily made of such poor materials and such poor welds that a lot of them just sunk on their own accord. Mm-hmm. You know, they sunk because they were put in water.
Yeah.
And the others, you know, the Germans would just sneeze and the thing would topple over. I mean, they were death traps. Even to put people in them because we wanted to supply the Brits, and when we were claimed to be neutral in the war, when we knew that 9 out of 10 were going to be blown out of the water was immoral. Well, anyway, there's a handful of victory ships that survived World War II. Mm-hmm. And one of those became a civilian cargo ship, and before it was mothballed, the U.S. military, the Navy, decided that this could be a platform for the new entity created in America called the NSA. And they turned this ship with all of its cargo holds into a spy ship. And right after the world became aware that the Muslim nations were going to attack Israel in a unified fashion, and to complete the job they failed to accomplish in 1948 with the War of Independence, that they were going to destroy Israel. And so the United States decided that it'd be a really swell idea to take this newly commissioned spy ship, which was painted all in military battleship gray, mm-hmm. and send it so that it was a couple of miles off the coast of Egypt at the commencement of the Six-Day War. Now talk about stupid. What in the hell was the U.S. doing sending a spy ship such that it was directly in between Israel and Egypt? Mm-hmm. What, they want Israel to fly over it and mistake it so that they could blame Israel? Was it the tripwire, like, you know, our troops in the DMZ and between North and South Korea are throughout the Ukraine, for example, where they want them attacked because when they're attacked we can justify war on somebody? Did they want it set up like the Maine? Remember the Maine, which was the justification for the Spanish-American War when it wasn't sunk by the Spanish? Or the Gulf of Tonkin incident where Lyndon Johnson got Congress to support I can't say war in Vietnam because we never did declare war, but the Vietnam conflict when in fact it was a lie? Or the sinking of the Lusitania, which would justify America's breaking its neutrality when in fact it was sent directly into harm's way on purpose to be sunk.
Yes.
Well, there are reports. There are reports now in the JFK library that JFK deliberately put the ship there, expecting the Egyptians to attack it, so that he could declare war on Egypt.
Wow.
In fact, there's a cable in the JFK library even saying that to the ambassador, be prepared. The United States is preparing to bomb Egypt. But anyway, the story, and I would encourage anyone who hears of this documentary on the USS Liberty, and it's being presented as those poor, valiant, and heroic veterans who died that day at the hands of those dastardly war criminals, the Israeli, deserve to be honored, and therefore we're going to tell their story. Well, everything they said is either an outright lie or a gross distortion of the truth. The USS Liberty was attacked because it was where it should not have been. Moshe Dayan even told the United States, listen, we're going to defend our borders. So if you have a ship or an airplane that you're going to have come towards our borders, you damn well better identify yourself. Let us know you're there, or we're going to blow it out of the water or out of the sky. Mm-hmm. We have to defend ourselves under this circumstance.
Makes sense to me. That's the right thing.
Well, the United States didn't identify itself. It put itself there, And it appears at 5 o'clock in the morning that some Israeli warplanes flew over it. Didn't really know what it was, but reported it back. It was put on a, you know how they used to in the wars, used to have those large tables. You put markers on the table showing positions of enemy and unidentified ships or airplanes and that sort of thing that people had sighted.
In the planning room, or the
in the planning room. So in the planning room, they put down a red chit that said not combatant but unidentified warship in this area. And these airplanes flew over it twice, and they didn't see a flag, saw no identification, and didn't have USS markings on it. It had three initials that were the original name for the NSA on the side, but nobody knew it at the time. They weren't publicly disclosing the NSA. And so they, by about 7 in the morning, they had overflown it several times and had just communicated enough to the war room that it went from a enemy target that they were concerned about to it's probably not an enemy target. It was replaced by a green chit, and then time went by. About 4 hours went by. There was nothing on its sighting or its location because they didn't know its location anymore. They just removed the green marker from their table. Next, and by the way, that's just the way. Now it's forgotten. So yes, there was a flyover, but no flag was identified. The ship was never identified, and it's now long forgotten. The next thing we hear is that the observer in the Egyptian city that it was just offshore reports a bombardment of that city, explosions, and so he's reporting that the city is being bombarded, and so Moshe Dayan sends out search planes and ships to find out what ship is bombarding the coastal town. And the only ship in that area happens to be the USS Liberty, but it's not called the USS Liberty. It's not marked. According to the Israelis, no flags on the ship. So they aren't quick to assume that that's the ship doing the bombardment, and comes to find out later the bombardment was retreating Egyptian troops went into a weapons depot and either accidentally or deliberately exploded the ordnance there. They were in such a hurry that they made a mistake, and one ordnance just went off and it exploded. All of them, I thought the Israelis were following them, and they didn't want the Israelis to have their weapons. One or the other, that's what happened, and that was the source of the bombardment. But in the fog of war, back particularly the day you didn't have the satellites, anything else. There's no way for the Israelis to know other than a ship was there. And the Israelis then had the two PT boats, torpedo boats with radar, say that the ship was moving at 30 knots and then 28 knots, and there's no commercial ship that could move that fast, so that was the protocol for determining a military ship. So they were asked what speed it was. They said, they were asked to verify it. They came back. And the likelihood is that the Liberty couldn't go that fast unless it was retrofitted during the makeover to a spy ship with more powerful engines. So the Israelis then send warplanes to intercept. They said, we've got a warship here. It's not one of ours. There's reports of the town that it's off being bombarded. We're going to attack it. It's not. The United States hasn't said. No country has said that it's there. And so they sent airplanes over and they strafe it. And then the second airplanes drop napalm on it, and it catches on fire. And at that point, there's no stopping what they consider to be an Egyptian warship. And so what we hear next is that Moshe Dayan or someone in the IDF dispatches torpedo boats. And when the torpedo boats approach, the USS Liberty fires 50 caliber machine guns at them.
Well,
and strikes the center PT boat. Now, the airplane, by the way, that scraped them had communicated on the normal war frequencies asking for the ship to identify itself, and it didn't respond. It flew over several times to try to find markings and could find no markings that were identified as a U.S. ship. And then when the PT boats approached, they were fired upon. 50 caliber machine guns. Once they're fired upon, they engage.
Yes.
They shoot their cannons at it, which are low caliber cannons, and then they released 5 torpedoes. Only one of the 5 torpedoes hit the USS Liberty, and since Blind Boy back in Germany was able to bring them down, that's sad on behalf of the PT boat officers. But only one hit. It went into the cargo hold. And at least 25 of the 30 that were killed weren't U.S. sailors. They weren't U.S. military.
What were they?
They were NSA. Okay. It hit the spy room aboard the ship.
Spy room.
Yeah. They aren't heroes. They aren't military. They aren't veterans.
CIA.
CIA and NSA. Yeah, CIA and NSA. What in the hell are they doing there?
Yeah.
Are they intercepting Israeli communications, intercepting Egyptian communications? The U.S. claimed to be neutral. What in the hell is it doing there?
So they followed the protocol there was that's proper, and then they kept strafing them after a while. And then, what do you expect someone to do?
Correct. What do you expect someone to do? That's why Moshe Dan said, if you're going to send a ship anywhere near us, you better identify it and let us know in advance, because we are not in a position where we're going to be able to tolerate any approach against our shores. We've got the entire Islamic world here against us. There were 8 U.S. investigations. None of the 8 found any indication that Israel had responded in a while that deliberately attacked the ship, that it knew that it was an American ship and deliberately attacked it. And the Israelis conducted a half dozen investigations. All of the evidence said that, it's just an act of war, it's a mistake. Well, going back now, the anti-Semites, Christian anti-Semites, neocon anti-Semites, flag-waving patriotic, we're promoting this conspiracy, but we're not afraid because we're bathed in the blood of Jesus types. That God gave them this film, and that the reason God gave them this film at this time is so that the world could be protected from these dastardly Jews. Sounds like the God you know?
I'm sorry? Say again?
Does it sound like the God you know?
Sound like Christians I know.
Yeah, sounds like Christians we know. So, if you hear of it, I would encourage everyone that hears of it, go read the Wikipedia article on what happened. It's marvelous. Now, there's lots of blame to go around, and there's some things that just are really uncomfortable to read. As I've constantly said, the Israelis are not without culpability. And America most certainly is guilty, but it's just astonishing that no one asked the most important question. What in the hell was the ship doing there? That the U.S. spy ships that were been shot down by China were shut down for a reason.
Yeah.
They
normal
put their nose where they shouldn't be. Right. The United States is still trying to thumb their nose at the Chinese by having ships in the South China Sea. The reason that the 747 was shot down by Russia is because we ran spy missions on that same route. We're begging for it, and we beg for this. And whether or not Johnson was culpable, as he was with the Gulf of Tonkin incident, where he allowed 60,000 Americans to die based upon a known lie. The Gulf of Tonkin never occurred. Or Truman with sinking in the Lusitania, which he knew was done deliberately, so to justify the sending Americans into World War I. Or just being sitting ducks for Pearl Harbor, so that America could justify getting into the war.
Yes.
It's all the same story. The sinking of the Maine. It's all the same story. over and over and over again. Now, I don't know if LBJ was that rotten. May have been. Don't really care, but I do care that the USS Liberty now is being used to play the oldest conspiracy in the world, blame the Jews.
Blame the Jews, yeah.
Speaking of conspiracies, today I received what may be the worst letter yet. I read the first 3 or 4 sentences in the first 2 or 3 paragraphs, and it was all to demean me, to condemn me, and demean me. And we'll talk about the subjects they brought up, because I think it's worth us clarifying.
Airing it out.
What my position is, what your position is on these topics. And the topics are going to be what in the world was Solomon talking about? And the speech that he gave during the dedication of the temple when he changed gears and went to the Nakri. And how does that play out in terms of who one of the witnesses may be in the end days? Okay. What's our view and God's view on homosexuality? I don't know how you can transition from one to the other, but this person did. And we'll talk about, I've got some very interesting things to say about homosexuality. And by the way, the story on the witness, we've hinted at it before. How I ended up translating those verses and what they mean, maybe as I don't know, nerve-wracking, unexpected, profound, revealing as anything I've done in the 19 years I've been doing this. So we're going to talk about it, how it was that I came upon those statements and what they mean. And I don't know what they mean, but I know it's important for us to figure it out. So we're going to talk about that. We'll talk about homosexuality. Really fascinating story on homosexuality. Sexuality in general. What's God's view? Does God hold the Christian puritanical view on sexuality? Talk a little bit about food, and false prophets and comparisons to some of the people he has used in the past.
Okay.
All right, so those are kind of some of the things that I want to talk about, and I also want to throw it out that this person did the same thing that last 3 or 4 have done in demeaning me. They identify with you, and they say that I'm really mean to you, and that I tell you what to say, and that they wish that you would, express the views that they hold, which they know that you really do secretly, but that I'm precluding you from saying them.
For all these, yeah, right. Okay.
Yes, in fact, on the last show, they said that I know that you told Kirk exactly what to say.
We talk a whole minute and a half before the show goes on, and that's our big communication.
Yeah. Well, sometimes we talk for 2 or 3 minutes.
We
did on this one. We asked. Our conversation was on Terry and her health and her recovery. So good news. I think the only thing, Kirk, in the years we have done this, I think there's only 2 times where I have specifically spoken to you about what to say. And one of those is, and you've done this several times, many times actually, is you've done some research, you've sent me your documentation, and I've asked you to present it, and I said, I'll ask you questions and along the way, but I want you to present your research. I think it's fascinating. I want you to do that.
Yep, we've done
You've done that a bunch of times, right?
Certainly.
Did I ever edit anything that or preclude you from saying anything or told you you need to go here but not here?
No, not at all. You've encouraged me to do so. Follow my own trail and present.
Yep. But the second thing I've told you is that any time you disagree with anything that I say, based on your research or just your own judgment, please say it. I want you to say it. Express it. Sure. If I've said something that I can't defend, then it's good that I'm called out on it. And if it is defensible, but both views are valid, then it makes the show much more accurate. And if we just end up disagreeing, then it's good radio.
So be it. Yeah.
So be it. Our relationship will be the same, whether we disagree or not.
Sure. I mean.
So that's it. Yeah. And for those that want to hold a different view just because it doesn't fit your narrative, I'm sorry. But Kirk's independent, and he shares what he finds, and he is encouraged to share that which is contrary to what I have learned. Matter of fact, this last one, when I sent you, I sent you a text that, oh man, I was getting major pushback every which way, including myself, and I said, before I start sharing this one, and what it was talking about the resurrection of Dowd.
Yes.
Could you do me a favor? Could you translate this too independently? I'm not going to send you what I've written. I want you to translate this, and you tell me what you think it says.
I think I sent you about eight pages or something of stuff.
You did. 8 pages on it. Yeah. And your conclusion was the same that I had drawn when the words were undeniable. The only difference between you and me is that I held out the possibility that the word could be was written differently within a different letter, with one additional letter, and that somehow it might be that, as opposed to that he'd be resurrected.
Yeah, but you were wrong.
But I was wrong. It's wrong. I was right. I was wrong.
You were wrong. You were right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be the end of chapter 2, and it ends with the resurrection of Dowd. And I ended up, because it caused such consternation with me and so many others, didn't with you, but it did with so many others, that ended up writing a whole narrative on why we shouldn't be surprised that everything that Yahowah ascribes to Dowd was corrupted and then applied to Yahushua, the Christian Jesus. And it's Hasatan's nature. He's not creative. All he can do is counterfeit. And so the 8 to 10, whatever they are, specific titles that are given to Dowd have all been stripped from him and given to the Christian Jesus Christ, including resurrected, including the second coming, including anointed Messiah, Mashiach. All those apply to Dowd, and they've been wrongly ascribed to Yahushua.
Honestly, that was really cut and dry to me.
Yes, it was really cut and dry.
Yeah.
Let's start with the second thing on this letter from this individual. It in essence said that if I have no problem with homosexuality, and I don't. I have friends that are homosexual. Personally, I don't get it. Personally, if I am exposed to it, whether it's on a video or something like that, or just two guys walking up kissing, it creeps me out. It's just, I don't get it. I mean, so from that point of view, it does creep me out. In terms of people who are pronounced homosexuals, living their lives and having a relationship with one another, but not parading it in my face, I have a problem with them. Many of them are fun-loving, nice people. Yeah. And so they said, that it shows, how far you've fallen, that this person, agrees with Yahweh, who hates them. And then it says, how can you say that you have no problem with homosexuality and then claim that Paul was a homosexual? And the third thing was, how dare you accuse Paul when it's evident that Dowd was a homosexual? Jonathan. So let's identify each of these things. First of all, I don't seek to demean Paul by calling him a homosexual. I wouldn't care that Paul was a trisexual or heterosexual. Mm-hmm. A trisexual is somebody who'll try anything sexually. I coined the term, so it's just my own poking fun. The reason that I draw attention to the observation that Paul was a homosexual was for a couple of reasons. One, There's a prophecy on Paul written 666 years before he wrote his first letter, where Yahowah stated that Paul was overly fascinated by and fixated on the male genitalia. Now, if a man is fixated on the male genitalia, what does that tell you about him?
Well, that's his focus. What can I tell you?
I'm definitely heterosexual, and I can tell you that the male genitalia is not something that I want to see. So God told us that he was going to be overly focused on, overly fascinated by the male genitalia. Well, that's a hell of a clue.
That's the clue.
The second thing is that Paul actually wrote that if you're circumcised, Christ can't even save you. Can't be saved.
Mm-hmm. Of course, he was circumcised.
And yet, what did he do with Timothy, the one man he claimed he loved?
He circumcised him, personally.
Mm-hmm. So, can you explain to me why Paul, who was adamant, his whole mantra, the core of it was his antagonism towards an argument against circumcision. Why would he personally circumcise Timothy?
Well, that's the absurdity of the whole thing. My God. Clue here.
It shows that he's a complete and utter hypocrite. Yeah. And then to have this man who is to circumcise the man that he loved, and who Yahowah says is overly fixated with the male genitalia, writes this tirade against homosexuality. He's a complete hypocrite. You ought not trust hypocrites.
No.
Right? That's the reason for telling that story.
Yes.
Now, let's switch to Dode and Jonathan. There is a passage that says that the soul of Jonathan was knit with the soul of Dode, and that Jonathan loved him as his own soul. 1 Samuel 18:1. Does that say that Dode and Jonathan were homosexuals?
No.
No. You and I share a similar soul. I think our souls are very similar. I love you like a brother. We have zero sexual interest in one another. None. So, same thing can be said of us, right?
Yeah. I suppose. You have to be kind of an idiot, but okay. You can say anything you want. Yeah, what are you going to do about it?
But no, somebody could say that the soul of Craig was knit with the soul of Kirk, and that Craig loved him as his own soul. Yeah, that's true. But there's zero sexuality associated with that. The next statement is found in 2 Samuel 1:26. It says, "This is when Jonathan was killed. Dode laments, 'I am distressed for you, my brother, Yahukanan. Very pleasant have you been to me. Your love to me was wonderful, passing the love of a woman.'" I know we have a limited use of terms in the English language, where many cultures have many words for love and many words for sexuality, and they aren't common. Love, Yahweh tells us that he loves his children. There's many things that Yahweh tells us he loves. Is he having sex with his children?
No, hardly.
No. I love Yisrael. I love the Torah. I love the covenant. Am I having sex with any of them?
Hardly.
I have experienced the love of a woman, and I would say my love of Torah exceeds my love of a woman.
I can see that.
Yeah. So, listen, if Dode and Yahukanan were bisexual, because Dode was clearly a heterosexual, if they were bisexual, and he had a brief bout with this early in his life, it really doesn't bother me. I really don't care, because it's not flaunted in our faces. Don't care. I think it's unlikely. I can't say for sure that it didn't happen. I just think that the likelihood of it happening is very small, and I say that mostly because Yahweh is really prone to exposing all of Dode's flaws. Yeah. He does it for a reason. that exposing Dode's flaws is what makes him the perfect conveyor of what is right.
Agreed.
Because it's not about being good; it's about being right. And so, I think Yahweh would have exposed Dode's flaws if Dode was a homosexual and he had something against it.
Yeah. I'm looking at the tablet of stone here, and I can't find homosexuality on there.
No, I can't either. And
so we know what
nor any reference to foods on there either. In fact, is there any reference to sexuality on it?
No.
No reference to sexuality, no reference to homosexuality, no reference to food.
Right.
All right. This is interesting. What about sexuality? This person wrote whoring around. It says, there shall be no whore of the daughters of Yisrael, nor a sodomite. This is a translation of the sons of Yisrael. But as we've come to expect, those translations are not accurate. The word rendered whore and the word rendered sodomite are the female and male versions of the Hebrew word for sacred prostitute, Yadesha and Yadosh. God's got a real problem with religious interpretations of sexuality. He's got a real problem with that. As a matter of fact, that's his issue against adultery. It's it's usually set into the context of religious adultery, being unfaithful by being lured into sexual acts while performing the religion. That's why the Moabites were wiped out the first time. Now, there isn't a comment on sexuality or homosexuality. In fact, there's not even a word for homosexuality in Devarim, Deuteronomy. So the question is, when and how does God speak against homosexuality? And I've always pointed out, it didn't make the top 10 list, and it's only mentioned 2 times in passing, and it's mentioned in the midst of a bunch of other stuff. Why are people like this woman so fixated on hating homosexuality? What is it about homosexuality that bothers them more than calling God the Lord, or claiming that his Torah was a set of laws, or speaking on behalf of Paul and establishing religions and of militaries that are so deadly? Why is it that they hate homosexuality and don't bother to accuse anyone of doing these other things? Well, the fact of the matter is that homosexuality, if you are to believe that God is against homosexuality, appears only 2 places, 2 statements, both of them in Leviticus, one 18:22 and the other is 20:13. Now, that's not to say that the Talmud and Jewish law are not opposed to it. The Talmud contains statements to the effect that anal sex among men causes solar eclipses. That's Sukkah 29a. I bet you didn't know that.
No, this is a fascinating place to work, buddy.
Yep, and anal sex among men also causes earthquakes. That was in the Jerusalem Talmud in Barakot 13:3. That was something else I was unaware of.
Well, thank you for that.
I just trying to be, full disclosure here.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah. But it also distinguishes between multiple forms of southern entry, and that anal sex warrants a death penalty by stoning, but that homosexual sex that doesn't involve penetration is no big deal, according to the rabbis. Although the rabbis were unwilling to ban sex with boys under the age of 9. They're a lovely group, aren't they? So, how about this? I decided I would just share briefly the context of Leviticus 20, where we have the statement on allegedly on homosexuality. Turns out it's not on homosexuality, but let me read the preamble to it because context is king. And the context of both of those statements is very similar. You're going to get a kick out of this. Again, now this is important because We have 3.5 billion Christians out there, and they've all been led to believe that homosexuality is something that God detests, right? And they see it as a blight on humanity. And if you don't hate homosexuals, then you are satanic or worse, right?
Yes.
Again, you shall say to the children of Israel, whosoever be of the children of Israel or of the strangers that sojourn in Israel, that gives any of his seed is zerah, unto Molech. Have you heard of Molech?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, Molech was the god of the Ammonites, one of the most revered gods in the area where Israel existed. Molech is mentioned not only in the Torah condemning it. By the way, can Yahweh have mentioned the name Molech here in the Torah and infer that speaking the name of a false god is sinful?
No, of course he can say it because you can't identify anything. How can you speak against something if you can't identify the name?
Yes. What he doesn't want is us promoting the false gods, Allah, Jesus Christ, the Lord. Don't promote them. But if you are going to do what he did, his example, if you're saying Molech for the express purpose of exposing and condemning behavior and beliefs, by all means. So anyway, their seed unto Molech. They weren't bringing in grass seed or barley seed.
No.
What they were doing was having sex with temple prostitutes. And that's where they were depositing their seed to Molech.
Yes.
So if you want to do religious sex, you shall certainly be put to death. The people of the land shall stone him with stones. Yeah. God detests religious sex. Detests it.
Well, it's such a seductive thing to get them away. How many times have you found it where Yahweh's children are seduced that way? I mean, we ran across it the other day with something we were studying.
Yeah, Moab. And Moab is quite the story, and it's the most grotesque of all the stories. But here he's complaining about them having sex with the temple prostitutes with Molech. And I will set my face against that man, and I will cut him off from among his people, because he has given of his seed unto Molech, to defile my sanctuary and to profane my set-apart name. God despises it. By the way, that puts the Roman Catholic Church in a heck of a bind because the history of priestly sex with not only with nuns but with the women who were brought into the orphanages and pulled off the street that ran, Roman Catholic institutions, not ran them, but were enslaved within them, is historic and disgusting.
Yes.
And of course, it shames Islam, which was built largely on the sex slaves. If it wasn't for sexual slavery, Islam wouldn't exist today. And if the people of my land do anyways hide their eyes from the man who has given his seed unto Molech, and kill him not, then I will set my face against that man and against his family, and I will cut him off, and all that go whoring after him, who commit whoredom with Molech from among their people. Is God speaking of young men and women, or even older men and women, who are not married and have sexual relations as part of dating?
No.
No. Is there any hint that he's speaking of promiscuity here?
No.
He is condemning religious behavior.
Correct. It's same theme constantly.
Yes, he's condemning religious behavior.
Yeah.
And the soul that turneth after such as familial spirits, and after after the wizards, to go on whoring after them. I will set my face against that soul, and I will cut him off from among his people. Whoring after familial spirits, whoring after wizards.
Yes.
These were religious.
Absolutely.
These are demons. Demons and religious individuals. Sanctify. Set yourself apart, therefore, and be set apart. For I am Yahweh, your Elohim, your God. And you shall observe my instructions and act upon them. I am Yahweh. For everyone that curses his father and mother shall surely be put to death. He has cursed his father or mother, his blood shall be upon him. Now, in this context, when he's talking about religious sexuality, do you think he's talking about mom and dad?
No.
No. He's talking here about condemning and cursing and acting in a way that demeans our Heavenly Father and spiritual mother. That's why he has been on a rage against religious sexuality. So he's saying, don't do that. If you're acting in a way that diminishes your father and mother, I'm not going to forgive you. And a man that commits adultery with another man's wife, even that commits adultery with his neighbor's wife, the adulterer and the adulteress shall be put to death. Now, this is a time where you could just read this and say, well, okay, God doesn't want you to have adultery with another man's wife or your neighbor's wife. Now, that is really a bad idea. Somebody's married, and you're married or not married, you ought not be causing someone to break up their marriage by having sex with them. Good advice, but that's not what he's talking about. And he most certainly isn't talking about promiscuity in the Christian sense. I mean, this person was condemning me because after my divorce, I dated, and I dated reasonably prolifically until the last 5 months. I've settled down with one person, and 4 months prior to that I was with another. So I have been monogamous here for most of this time. But for a while, I dated a lot, and I've been of the conclusion of two things. One is that God's the inventor of sexuality, and he's got no issue with it. There are certain things he doesn't want done, but he's very specific in what those are. I didn't violate any of those. And I don't think it's possible that you're going to meet your happily ever after of the first person that you go out with. I think that's absurdly unrealistic. So in this particular case, the word for neighbor, you familiar with that Hebrew word?
No.
Reah.
Reah?
It's one of the many, written exactly like Ra. Many and Ra'ah. All of those words. All of those words are a family of words, all that speak of evil, misled, going the wrong way, wrong, wicked.
Yeah,
so here, the neighbor isn't just the girl next door.
Yeah.
Based upon the very word, it's evil and wicked.
Yeah. 90% of them are.
Yes.
That's the raw. That's with an ayin rather than a aleph, right? So it's facing.
Yes.
Different, wrong.
The ain ra'ah is different than the aleph ra'ah. The aleph ra'ah is to see and to be a shepherd. The ain ra and ra'ah is to be evil, corrupt, wicked, to have missed the way, to mislead, and all of those sorts of things. And the man who lies down with his father's wife and has uncovered, revealed his father's, and the word for nakedness here that appears is also the word for vulnerability. Has revealed his father's vulnerability, and both of them shall be put to death. Their blood shall be upon them. And so this is incest here. And if a man lies with his daughter-in-law, both of them shall surely be put to death. They have wrought confusion, and their blood shall be upon them. Incest again, right? So in this context of condemning religious prostitution with Molech and of incest, we then read 20:13, and I want to read it just as the words say, because this is a challenge to translate. It says, and Wah, a male individual, Ish, who Asher lies down, Sakab, is made to lie down on or over. And this is often used in connection with death. You lie down in death, called imperfect. With, and this is interesting. You just read the English translation, a man who lies with another man. The second word, Ish is a male individual. The second word is Zakar. Zakar, as primary meaning of Zakar, is to remember, to make a proclamation that is memorable.
Oral, if you wish,
Like Zakar Yah, remember Yah. But a Zakar is also a male, typically a son or a boy, an adolescent or a younger person. So a male individual who lies down with a son, with an adolescent child, with a boy, in a way that makes a memorable proclamation, a way that is recalled and told, on a bed or a briar, mishkah, but that's going to be the interesting word, couch, which is made to lie upon in death or sleep, for meditation or illness, for marital acts or lodging. And this is a word that is the most difficult to translate, and we'll wonder, why did God say that a male individual who lies down with a male child, an adolescent, a younger person, on a bed or briar, mishkab, and then it's Isha. Isha is either a bed of fire, and mind you that a mishkab is a funeral briar, of fire, of a wife's, of a mother's, or a woman's.
Is this related to
both of them have engaged in a detestable thing. They shall die twice, muth. Their blood is with them. Does that sound to you like that is a condemnation of homosexuality?
No.
God's making a point here, but we better understand why this word mishkab was thrown into this mix and why he used zakar, a son, a boy, an adolescent, a younger person, as an act that is a proclamation, a memorable proclamation. Why did he use that term? And why was this mishkab associated with a fire, of a wife, a mother's, or a woman? In all the English translations, it says that if a man lays with another man in the manner of a woman, well, there is no if in the text. The first word is man. The second, there is no another. The second zakar isn't one of the top 4 Hebrew words for man. There's no ka, which is the Hebrew word like. And mishkab does not mean like. And they just completely ignored it because they couldn't figure out a way to translate it. Now, I'm fairly convinced that I understand the rudimentary differences between men and women. How is it possible for a man to lay with a woman, or lay with another man the way you would lie with a woman if you're talking about sexuality? Is it possible? Do two men have the same opportunity to engage such that two men can have sex the same way that a man and a woman can have sex?
I don't think so.
No, in fact, I can tell you for a fact they can't. You know, indoor plumbing, outdoor plumbing.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah. Two interacting swords. We ain't making this happen. It is impossible. So the English translations are not only impossible, they're nonsensical, and they don't reflect the words. This then continues. 2014 says a man should take a wife and her mother in his wickedness. Yeah. You can have the wife, but you can't have the wife and her mother. And they shall be burnt with fire, which is really interesting, since the word mishkab is often translated funeral pyre, and isha's primary meaning is fire, feminine word for fire. To have that shall be burnt with fire is an interesting statement. That certainly gives credibility to that interpretation. Both he and they, that there will be no wickedness among you. And if a man lies with a beast, God's not fond of bestiality, he shall surely be put to death, and you shall slay the beast. And if a woman approaches unto any beast and lies down here to you should kill the woman and the beast, and they surely should be put to death, and their blood should be on them. By the way, one of my objections to this thing being about homosexuality before I translated it was that how can God be against homosexuality if it's only about men lying with other men, and he says nothing about women? Women are far more prone to homosexuality than are men, and vastly more prone to bisexuality than are men. In fact, it may be true that today that we're very close now to having the majority of women being bisexual, of young women being bisexual, and probably 4 times the amount of women are lesbians than men are homosexual. So why didn't he mention those things if, in fact, homosexuality was his issue? He didn't, did he? He does think, but he takes the time to mention women and bestiality.
Yeah, I'm looking at the verse as we go. I looked it up on the computer while we're going, so it's it's not there.
So it's not there. And if a man shall take his sister, his father's daughter, and his mother's daughter, and see her nakedness, see her vulnerability, and she see his vulnerability and nakedness, it is a wicked thing, and they shall be cut off from the sight of their people that have uncovered or revealed his sister's vulnerability, and he shall bear his iniquity. God's not fond of incest. And whether it is just exposing someone's vulnerability or it's incestual behavior where there's a sexual component, either way you want to translate those words, and both are fine. And this isn't about actually having sex with them, it's just revealing their vulnerability or exposing their nakedness. These God's not the least bit interested in us doing anything. Then there's this passage, of course, that comes next. I just thought was interesting because it's translated is that don't deal with a woman who is sick, and this is the translation of it. It says, and a male individual, an ish, who lies down shakab again with a dawa, which is a sick, weak, and contaminated individual. It is interpreted as menstruating, but the word means feeble, faint, contaminated, ill, unwell. Mm-hmm. That's what the word means.
Yes.
So a male individual who lies down with a sick, weak, and contaminated individual, it's been interpreted to be menstruating, but the word doesn't mean that. Female individual, isha, and reveals, makes known, and exposes, galah, accordingly, eth, her vulnerability, irwa. It can be her genitals or indecency, her repulsiveness or private parts, her nudity or improper behavior. Now, I have a real problem with God creating menstruation as part of the natural anatomy of a woman, and as it deals with the reproductive cycle, and to call it repulsive. are improper. So there's something else going on here. Right. This sickness, this weakness, this contamination is of another cause. Then it says, according to her vulnerability, along with her fountain, Makor, her mass movement of liquid flowing from a source, a well or spring, from Kur, to dig or bore for water. Again, not the right word to use if you're dealing with menstruation. It's not her fountain. He has poured out, is the word used, ara, caused to expose and laid bare. And she has revealed and made known, gala again, the fountain, the mass movement of her blood. Both of them shall be cut off from the midst of the people. Now, before you say, well, that's blood, so that's it, it must be menstruation. How many times has God already said that they have revealed their blood? They have exposed their blood. They have shown their blood. The blood was considered the essence of life. That's what they've exposed. And it's throughout this. And you shall not walk in the manners of the Goy and the Gentiles, which I cast out before you, for they committed all of these things, and therefore I abhorred them. And ye shall put the difference between clean and unclean beasts, and clean and unclean fowl, and clean, and ye shall not make your souls an abomination by beast or fowl, or by manner of living things that creep on the ground, that I have separated from you as unclean. All right, so that's the context of it.
Okay.
Pretty religious context, don't you think? Pretty hard to deny that he is condemning religion and incest.
Yeah, well, as he should.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I think incest is one of the greatest crimes that a person can commit, because for a person growing up to be sexually abused by a parent in particular, or by a sibling, is so disorienting, such a violation of familial trust that so difficult to recover from. So wrong.
You have to feel safe in your home, and a child has to feel safe in their home, and it just really destroys all of that. And, most that are abused wind up becoming abusers later too. It's just terrible when it goes on.
Yep. All right, Torah 18. That's the other place that allegedly speaks of and condemns homosexuality. I should just say that Torah 18:6 speaks of do not uncover or expose the nakedness or vulnerability of near of kin. No incest again. And then he goes on to explain that. I don't want you to expose the nakedness or the vulnerability of your father or mother, or uncover or expose, because she is your mother. The nakedness or vulnerability of your father's wife you shall not uncover or expose. It is your father's disgrace. The nakedness, vulnerability of your sister, the daughter of your father, the daughter of your mother, born at home or abroad, or even the vulnerabilities you should not expose. Incest. The nakedness, vulnerability of your son's daughter or of your daughter's daughter, their nakedness, vulnerability you shall not expose, for theirs is your own vulnerability. 11 through 17 just continue to depict all possible forms of incest. 18. Neither should you take a wife to her sister to trouble her by uncovering or exposing her nakedness or vulnerability besides the other in her life. 19. Also, you should not come near or approach towards a woman to reveal or make known her nakedness, vulnerability, as she is rejected for her impurity. 20. You shall not lie giving seed, Nathan Zerah, with your neighbor's wife to contaminate yourself with her. And you shall not let any of your seed pass through the fire to Molech. Neither shall you profane the name of your Elohim. I am Yahowah. Incest in religion. And so this is what comes next. young boy by way of a memorable proclamation, Zakar, and with a Zakar, an adolescent who is a younger person, as a way of remembering, recalling, or commemorating an event through a public pronouncement. Do not lie down, lo shakab. Do not be made to lie down upon or over a bed or a briar, this mishkap again, this couch to lay upon in neither death or sleep, of fire, of a wife's, of a mother's, or a woman's. It's actually she is a detestable thing. She is a detestable thing. Not a man committing homosexuality is a detestable thing. She is a detestable thing. So once again, we have Zakar, not the Hebrew word. Number one Hebrew word for man is Adam.
Mm-hmm.
The second most common Hebrew word for man is Ish. The third most common Hebrew word for man is Enosh, means mortal.
Right.
I don't know how far Zakar is down the list, but Zakar is used 99% of the time to convey, to remember, to proclaim, to recall. Very, very seldom that it is used as male, and when it's describing a male, its distinction is a son, an adolescent, someone who is much younger.
Mm-hmm.
So, could this be speaking of pedophilia? Yeah, possibly.
Sure.
But of homosexuality? No, that would be very, very difficult to justify. No. Most of the time, Kirk, that I run across something that's a challenge,
yeah,
the answer comes to me a week before the challenge is presented. I don't know why that's happened, but for the last 19 years, that's happened. Before the question is presented, the answer is given. Happens all the time. About a week, maybe a few days before this person brought up that God hates homosexuals and how dare I have friends that are homosexuals, I received an email that was a very thoughtful analysis of these two passages. And this is what it says. The challenge of interpreting and translating the Torah lies in the fact that there is no dictionary for the text, for there's no ancient dictionary. That's true. Much like a 7th grade English class, we're forced to use contextual clues when we come across a word or concept with which we are not familiar. In this case, the word that has created the confusion over the centuries is the one that I brought out. It's this mishkab. So let's take a look at all of the times this word appears in the Torah and the context that it's used. That's this article I wrote. I said, I want to applaud these guys. They got this right. Could be girls. I don't want to be judgmental here. Could have been women that wrote this. But they got this right. That's what you want to do. And that's what's going to lead, by the way, to the witness thing, is you find a word that's uncommon, you look how the word was first used in the Torah.
Yes.
And that's going to drive its definition. The first two verses that they cited were the two verses that are misrepresented to imply homosexuality, Leviticus, Kara, 18:22 and 20:13. There's only one other use in the Torah of the word for this allegedly bed or briar, mishkab. It's Bereshit, Genesis 49:4. At this point in the Torah, Jacob is on his deathbed, and he is giving the final blessings to each of his children. Rather than bless Reuben, though he says that Reuben is unstable like water and without excellency, without worth, because you went up to your father's bed, your mishkah, and defiled it.
Mm-hmm. Wondered if that was
you went up to your father's bed, mishkabah, and defiled it. What is he talking about? Well, the reference goes back to Bereshit 35:22. It reads that when Jacob's wife Rachel had died, Jacob should have moved in with his first wife, Leah. Instead, Jacob elevated his concubine, Bilhah. Now, we're going to talk about this later in terms of Yahweh's view on sexuality. Who's the single most important father in all of human history, according to Yahweh?
Well, Abraham's father.
Nope.
But you're saying Jacob?
Nope. He's either second or third. Who's the most important father relative to, from God's point of view?
Yeah.
Man, I'm talking about the man who is the focus of Bereshit 35:22. Jacob.
Yeah.
Jacob fathered 12 kids, right?
Yeah, he had 12, yes.
Yes, Jacob fathers Yisrael. The chosen people's father is Jacob. There's no more important father from Yahweh's perspective. He fathered the 12 tribes of Yisrael, 13 if you count the Loy.
Correct. I'm sorry. Yes.
Yes, and he had a wife named Rachel, right?
Yes.
He also had a wife named Leah. How many wives does that make?
2.
This person wrote, may condemn me because, the only way that you can live a godly life is just to have one wife. How many wives did he have?
He had 2 so far, and 2 concubines.
And he elevated his concubine.
Yes. The status.
Bilhah, how many concubines did he have? He had 2. 2 wives, 2 concubines, and through them he fathered the 12 tribes of Israel. Does Yahweh ever say, I can't tolerate this because you committed adultery? You were a fornicator.
No.
In fact, why don't we just go back to Abraham? He's either the second or third most important father from Yahweh's point of view.
Yeah.
What does God say to Abraham about having sex with Hagar? He said, you dirty scumbag, I thought a lot more of you than that. I cannot believe that after all we've done and talked about together that you committed adultery. You fornicator, you. Do you recall reading that part?
No,
is there any hint of that?
No, sir.
No. And, in fact, did he say, I want you to mistreat Ishmael? Do I want you to mistreat Hagar?
No.
Listen to your wife, send them away, give them provisions, but send them away. There's not a single reprimand to Abraham for committing adultery. He certainly did, but that's your standard. Because from Yahweh's point of view, it wasn't adultery. It's not here. 12 tribes, you've got children that are born from concubines.
Mm-hmm.
Concubine is a sex slave.
Yes.
What's God saying about it? Nothing. Dode. You know how many wives Dode had?
He had close to a dozen, probably 10 or something.
No, 7. 7 is the right answer. He had 7 wives. 7. Did Dode have any concubines? Did Dode have any concubines? No, not too many. 10 is the answer.
Okay,
10 concubines, 7 wives. Did Yahweh ever call Dode an adulterer?
No, he calls him Sadek.
Right, yes. Does Yahweh ever rebuke Dode for having concubines?
No.
Being promiscuous with concubines? Not once. Dode's a pretty important father because he gave birth to Solomon, and father and son were over the only period of time that Israel was a united kingdom. And beyond that, Yahweh calls Dode my son, and I am his father. So he is an exemplar in that regard. And, of course, he fathered the line that would bring us Yosha. That makes him a really important father. Did God once condemn him for adultery or sexual promiscuity?
Never.
And I know somebody's going to say, oh, but wait a minute, he was really unhappy with him for Bathsheba. He wasn't unhappy with him for Bathsheba. He was unhappy with him because Bathsheba's husband was a covenant member. And he sent him out to die so he could have his wife. And God says, that's dirty and underhanded. What you did there is wrong. It wasn't going from 6 wives to 7. Was the way he did it. So, anyway, that's I just thought it was important to bring that up, that God invented sexuality. He doesn't speak against promiscuity. And anytime he's speaking of whoredom and adultery and prostitution, it is almost always in the context of religion.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, when Jacob's wife Rachel died, Jacob should have moved in with his first wife Leah, but instead Jacob elevated his concubine Bilhah. Reuben, Leah's oldest son, was very upset. Yeah, I don't blame him. And to show his protestation, he slept with Bilhah in order to humiliate his father and get revenge. The story used the verb va-ishka, and he laid, but long after this event, Jacob uses the noun form of the word mishka. Mishka, the same word we're dealing with in both of the Torah accounts on supposedly homosexuality. Jacob refers to it by the same term. With this use of the word, it is clear that Jacob is rebuking Reuben's attempt at revenge in order to humiliate and embarrass him. The idea that the word is used as a signifier for revenge, dehumanizing, and humiliation is not new. And I won't share them now, but there's 4 or 5 rabbinic types in their writings, and I don't want to speak well of rabbinic types, but sometimes they get things right. And in this case, they made it very clear that mishka is used, and particularly when it speaks of isha after it, refers to something that is humiliating. It's degrading. And so what God is saying is that with a young boy, a man with a young boy should not degrade him. And it's more than just degrading a young child, which is despicable. That's the Bathsheba thing in Afghanistan that caused so many U.S. vets to take their own lives. You know, they were told they were going in there to save these good people and give them democracy, and every time they'd throw the Taliban out of a community, the elders that took power in their wake would take an attractive young 6-year-old boy and chain him to a bed and rape him. They called it boy play. God said that's degrading, it's disgusting, it's an abomination. Despise it. Don't do that. And that was right in the middle of this whole context on incest. Self-defining. Don't do what was done to Jacob's concubine. The second application of it is that the Greeks, the Romans, the Assyrians, the Babylonians raped those that they conquered. They raped both the men and the women. They raped the men to humiliate them. They raped the women as a prize of conquest. So did the Muslims, by the way. So there you have it. By the way, I did check in the Dead Sea Scrolls to see if there was a textual variation. It is interesting that both of the scrolls, as they relate to those 2 different portions of Leviticus Kara, go right up to the verse prior, and they jump ahead to verses after. This ain't there. By Now, I just want to conclude my thoughts on this. And Kirk, you're entitled. We've gone through the material together. You haven't had as much time to think about it as I have. I had 2 hours prior to the show to make these translations and do this research. Well, I've always been uncomfortable with this being a ban on homosexuality because it referenced men, not women. When you translate it and you see zakar in there, and this very unusual term that can only be defined by its context, this mishkab, and that the context defines in the Torah mishkab as that which is designed to humiliate, that which is a form of retribution. This means to get revenge, to humiliate. Has nothing to do with homosexuality.
If you're going to go to the first mention of it, that's Genesis 49:4. So, or Bereshit 49:4, and that's exactly what he's talking about there. So that's your cue, and
yep. That reference is 35:22.
Oh, it's 35:22. I thought I had 49:4.
Well, no, the first reference, you're right, is 49:4. Okay. And 49:4, with Jacob, rather than bless Reuben, he says that Reuben is unstable like water without any decency because you went up to your father's bed, Mishkabah, and defiled it. You sought to humiliate your father. Yeah,
that's your motive.
And then on Bereshit 35:22, it explains what Reuben had done, so that we understand the basis of that word. You know, Reuben trying to defend his mother, who Jacob should have elevated rather than the concubine, Bilnah, and so Reuben slept with the concubine to humiliate his father.
Yeah.
It's about humiliation. It's about degradation.
Yeah.
It's not about male homosexuality. Now, Reuben did it with his concubine. His concubine was a woman.
Yes.
It has nothing to do with homosexuality.
I don't think people that listen to this show, a lot of the ones on the perimeter at least, the ones that are still looking, perhaps, are the ones that just for whatever reason are entertained by it somehow, that are not covenant members, understand how much research. I'm not going to blow your horn, but I'm just going to say that's a good example of how much time it takes to. I'm not that fast. I can usually find it if I have time to sit down and really look through it. And y'all was there helping me. I acknowledge that. But that's a lot of research you have to go through. I'm looking. It's like 400. God, how many is it? It's just on the mention is 46 occurrences, and to do it right, you look through all of them to see what's going on, and then you go back to where it's explained, and then I go to a thing. It's kind of a little search engine, and it will look to that in all the related words, and more times than not, it'll have pretty much everything that you have been able to find as well. But I'll do all this before we ever talk about something, only because I enjoy it. I like to see where the words lead, and what I can find. And that's a lot of work. So people just throw these stupid remarks out, and I'm amazed that you take the time to go through it to answer it back. I mean, it's
well, there's a reason that I'm motivated to do it, which is that I'm not a prophet. I'm never claimed to be a prophet. I don't even want to infer that I'm a prophet. Nothing. I mean, I'm as furthest from a prophet you could possibly be. And my whole mission has been to reveal as accurately and completely what the prophets actually said, and then to help everyone who is interested understand them. And so if you're going to do that, it's really important to try to be as accurate as you can be. So the motivation is to be accurate. And there are a lot of words in Hebrew that are difficult to translate.
Well, that was one. In fact,
the one we're going to spend our next show on is an example of that. It's Zeroah. And if you aren't willing to put in the time to look where a word has been used previously and how Yahweh has defined that word, you ought not be doing this. Yahweh needs to find somebody else to do it.
Yeah.
He's really keen on the idea of his words being rendered accurately, and the only way to do that is to study them in context, and particularly to use them in first use. So, yes, it does take time. Now, there's another motivation for doing it. Yeah, I do want to be accurate because, I've written 19 books now.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I want to be accurate. Because if you start going off and saying things that are just ridiculous and untrue, you're going to undermine the credibility of all those. That's 19 years now. I won't do that. The second is, Kirk, is the same reason you do it. And my guess is that you're probably going to after this show, you're probably going to say, hey, can I have the renderings that you did on this subject? And you'll probably want to go check those translations yourself and see if you can either validate or find fault with what I did, and we'll have a discussion on it. That's your nature. And if you and I'll be far more interested in us discussing it if you disagree than if you agree.
Okay.
That's because it's always more interesting, I think. Nothing I want more than if I'm wrong is someone to point out that I'm wrong. As it turns out, on homosexuality, I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
I can be wrong about a bunch of things. I'm not wrong on this.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned this devotion to checking out a word. We're not going to have time for it on this program because it's a full program, and it's worth our time because it's really interesting. I was involved translating the 40th chapter of Yahowah. Now, I was involved doing that because I made this commitment that I was going to translate the first 7 Mizmor. As it turns out, I'm going to translate the first 24 Mizmor because they just all are so rich with insights. But I made the commitment I would translate the first 4, and I was translating the 5th Mizmor. And I ran across a statement that where I'm reading that Dode is the one that Yahowah is talking about using to help create a straightforward and elevated highway. And in fact, there's 3 words that are used in Mizmor 5 that I recognized were picked up by Yahuchanan the immerser when he gives his famous statement, make way in the wilderness, of a voice calling out in the wilderness, make way for the presence of the Lord in the English translations. And we know that's a translation, a Greek translation of what was said in Yahowah 40. So I read these words and I said, man, that really sounds like something I've heard before. And so I went to the Yahuchanan, the immerser quote, and I read it. I said, wait a minute. This doesn't make any sense in the context of Yosha. Why is he citing it? And it's picked up by Yahuchanan, the disciple. First chapter, I think, of Yahuchanan. And it's clearly a truncated citation of Yahowah 40. So if you're curious, if you want to be accurate, if you want to make the connections, what are you going to do? You're going to finish the Mizmor 5 and move on with your life? Or are you going to say, wait a minute, this is in the top 2 or 3 most cited prophecies to somehow distinguish Yosha, and even though it doesn't mention Yosha's name, is applied to him, but it's quoting Yahowah 40. And Yahowah 40 specifically names the individual that the prophecy pertains to. Dode.
There you go, problem.
I said, well, now, that's either a problem or an opportunity, depending on your mindset.
Well, my perspective is an opportunity, but yes.
Yeah, it's an opportunity. It's a real problem for Christianity.
And that's the problem.
Right. And so I began to translate it, and I've come across things that are just amazing. Like one of the things that we know that Yosha quoted Dode, right?
Mm-hmm.
At the most important moment of his life, Yosha is quoting Dode, saying, my God, why have you forsaken me?"
Correct.
Okay. Right. We know that's the case. Do you know that Yahweh quotes Dode?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, he does. Yahweh quotes Dode. And that
I was
one of the most.
With someone today about that. It was quite staggering. They were quite, wow, really?
Wow. Yeah, one of the most interesting twists of words, and particularly in the original Hebrew, is found in Yahshua 40, where it speaks of the grass withers and the flower fades, but the word of our God endures forever. You know, it's quoted by Christian pastors everywhere to infer that even Paul's writings were somehow divinely inspired and would endure forever. Well, the actual Hebrew words are very different than what that sounds in English, and it is profound in Hebrew. But it doesn't first appear in Yahshua. 300 years before Yahweh asked Yahshua to write those words,
Dode said it.
Dode penned them in a psalm. Oh my!
Right.
So now you have Yahshua citing Dode, and you have Yahweh citing Dode.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be cool to be at the level that Yahweh is citing you? That'd be pretty cool. Actually, I would never want that kind of responsibility, but Dode had it. Dode had it. So as I don't like to go to anything and pull it out of context.
Yeah.
I just figure when you do that, your chances of making a mistake are so high, and your chance of missing something important are also so high. It's just not worth doing. So I'm translating Yahshua. It's a long story, but we're going to get to the meaning of the story, and that's going to be the purpose of our next program.
Okay.
I'm translating Yahshua 40, and it's specifically speaking of Dode, and it says he's a Zeroah. Uh-oh. I have a problem. I've written it, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I wrote an entire chapter called Zeroah. Now, what I did is the first time I came across it, I rendered it sacrificial lamb because the first uses of Zeroah in the Torah, I did this same thing. I went to the Torah, and I went to first use, and the first use of Zeroah was always the sacrificial lamb and how it was being prepared, because the sacrificial lamb is eaten, right? Nourishes us. So it was always about the sacrificial lamb. So I translated sacrificial lamb. I said, the word is defined as arm, but it's almost never used that way. Sacrificial lamb. Well, here, Dode's not a sacrificial lamb. He's a shepherd.
No, yes.
He's a shepherd. And so what I had to do is do a better job than I did 10, 12 years ago with Zeroah. And so rather than looking at the first uses of Zeroah in the Torah, I studied them all. Every single one of them, because I didn't want to make a mistake. And I found that Zeroah is used in a number of different contexts. And then as I shared everything I learned about Zeroah and came up with a definition of Zeroah that works in now when it's in reference to Dode and in reference to Yosha. It's, by the way, it's a shepherd among the sheep. Yeah. Now that didn't resonate me with the time, but are you familiar with the two letters that comprise God's most used title? L.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's the shepherd.
What are those two letters? Yeah, what are those two letters, Kirk?
Oh, the
and what is the Aleph? What is the Aleph?
It is the ram's head, the protector of the flock, or the lamb, the authority, we say sometimes too, and the instrument that he uses to guide them and protect them as well as rescue them.
Okay. So the Hebrew word for God is a shepherd among his sheep.
Yes, sir.
It is a ram who is also the leader and protector of the flock, right?
Right.
So it's not only a shepherd, but a shepherd among the sheep.
Yes.
All right.
And they're with them.
That is what Zeroah means.
Yes.
That is what Zeroah means.
And that
applies to Dode perfectly, does it not?
Yes, it does.
And Yah was constantly saying, Dode is my shepherd. He is the right shepherd. He is the shepherd I pulled out of the sheepfolds to take care of my flock. He says it over and over and over and over again. He's the shepherd Yah was bringing back. In fact, one of the great miracles that God says when he was talking to the high priest Yosha is that, I'm going to come back. I'm going to return with my shepherd. And then he refers to the shepherd in the next statement and says, oh, by the way, his name is Dode. So I was able to translate Zeroah, but this time, Kirk, I had made a mistake the last time. It wasn't really a mistake. It's kind of like the fact that we realize now that Dode was Yahweh's Mashiach, because Yahweh says Dode is my Mashiach over and over and over again. So that means that Dode is Yahweh's Messiah. And I didn't make the mistake of calling Yosha Yahweh's Messiah, because Yahweh never calls Yosha the Messiah. And in fact, the two places where the term Mashiach is associated with him, it's used as an adjective, not as a title.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to find a word that since the only time Mashiach is used, it's not extant in the Dead Sea Scrolls. I was just scrambling for what could possibly be there that would be correct. And I found that there's this word that's used as a name 22 times, and it's Masayah. I said, yeah, well, I can't prove it, but maybe Masayah is there, and Masayah has nothing to do with Messiah. Yeah, it has nothing to do with Messiah. It means the work of Yah, and Yosha clearly is the work of Yah. So I can call Yosha the Masayah and be accurate. That's what his name means. Yah was saving us, so Yosha is the work of Yah, the Masayah. Well, Dode is the Mashiach, Messiah. Yeah. And if there is a Messiah, it's based upon the Hebrew word Mashiach, and Dode was the one that was Mashiach. Well, this time I don't want to make the mistake. It's just beginning to feel, based upon the things that we have read on the choder and the neck, and all the things that were said about the neck, to feel a sense of responsibility, something that I never wanted and never thought I would have to deal with. Because it's one thing to freely be learning and sharing what you learn, and to work 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, for 19 years doing it. It's another thing entirely to read that you have a responsibility. And so I'm really doing everything I can to be as accurate as I can possibly be. If I was going to make mention of this, that's the least we can do.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to goof on Zeroah.
You're doing everything you can be doing. I mean, in Dabarim, not Dabarim, but in the section on when Yah was talking about his Pesach, when Moshe is talking about Pesach, the term comes out Shemar Debar, and
right.
It's genuinely
observe the words.
Yeah, but it's genuinely, carefully examining, considering this message or these words, and all you can do is the best you can do. And it doesn't even bother me that when we started doing some of this, and you were sending me some early translations, and I would look up all these, and you say, well, see what you think, and I did this, and I look up this verse, and I'm going through everything and coming to some of the same conclusions, as many as I could with the material I have to work with and the time restraints. And I was going, wow, this is exactly what this means, and this is phenomenal. To me, it came, wow, that's really right. That's easy. And once you prove that that's Mashiach, and once you prove that's Mashiach, and then you go through that whole thing of, nobody quotes Yosha because he only quoted Torah. He was the living manifestation of the Torah. Therefore, it's nothing to quote from him unless you're going to do what he did, and what he did was quote the Torah. So these things, somehow I can connect those kind of dots and say, okay, well, that makes sense. So I'm on the same page. It's like I have to. Terry and I were mentioning some of our early experiences when we first got Yada Yahweh. Once we got it in the head, okay, this is right, then it's easy to throw away your Christmas tree. I mean, or whatever it is. You just turn away and walk the other direction. I mean, so it doesn't.
So this time,
labor.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's just a matter of having the want-to.
Yeah.
And if you have the want-to, you're going to be rewarded.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't do it for
coming
reward.
up with and affirming
insights
that are profoundly important to Yah, to his people, to their salvation, to their relationship. That's a highly rewarding undertaking. So the rewards are spectacular. So back to Zerah.
Yeah.
There are two additional mentions of Zerah that even the best lexicons, and the most thorough lexicon is really the theological word book of the Old Testament. I hate the name, but that's the one. And you don't go to it unless you want to invest the day, because it's really detailed. It's got a lot of religious rubbish in it, but it's really detailed. And even they said, all right, so here's all the ways that Zerah can be used, and they gave them all. And I went through them all. And then it says, and then there's these two. And they had no clue what to do with them. They said, and then there's these two. Wilkirk, the first one of those two, it's the introduction to Yahowah 53. And Kirk, I read that. I said, no, I can't say that. And then I translated it. I said, please don't say that. I'm not going to quote it here. I'm just going to paraphrase it because we're going to go into it next week.
All right.
What it says is that Yahowah is reminiscing with Yahowah. And he says that it's remarkable that this individual from an entirely different place has come to appreciate and then prove our message. In other words, to study Yahowah and convey what it actually says. And he uniquely has come to appreciate the nature of the Zerah. Will Kirk, do you know how many people have written about the Zerah?
I think you're unique in that regard. Oh, wow.
And that's the preamble to understanding Yahowah 53.
Oh, wow.
Now, I didn't seek that, but that's what's there.
Yeah.
So the last one on Zerah was Solomon is dedicating the
yes, that's the one I translated. Oh, yes.
Oh, my. And while he's dedicating the temple, he's talking about all the things that are important. These are the promises. Let's cherish the promises that Yahowah made to my father Daud. Let's understand the value and the merit of those promises, why we're all here. And let's commemorate the importance of the Ark of the Covenant that is in this amazing home and house. And that, we're here because of my father's relationship with Yahowah, and he provided everything we needed to build this, and now we've had the opportunity to build it, and here we are dedicating it. And if we cherish and act upon the promises that Yahowah made to my father, then so many wonderful things will befall us. But when we don't, it's going to be really bad. And the next statement includes the Zerah. And it's the only place in the entirety of the Torah, prophets, and Psalms that Yahweh is inspiring a man to speak on behalf of a foreigner, somebody in a different place, a different time, speaking a different language, a far different place, far away place, far distant time, as a foreigner, non-Israeli. In fact, it even says, who's not among your people, Israel. And he calls this individual a nakar, and uses nakri. And what it says, what Solomon said about this individual was so unexpected that I don't know. I translated it 3 weeks ago. I haven't been the same since.
No,
I didn't go off looking for this. I was looking to properly define Zeroah, and we will go into what it says because it was the question that I had answered a week prior, and we'll go into next week, maybe even the week after, because it's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Why was only one of the two witnesses during the time of Jacob's troubles? One was mentioned. He's mentioned in Malachi. And he is, in my view, the most intimidating, sarcastic
he's a tough dude.
prophet that Yahweh ever commissioned. He's Elia. And, when we translated, how he went up against the 850 prophets and priests of Baal Peor, and started mocking their God, taking a nap, recusing himself to go to the restroom. I mean, I just fell in love with this guy. And he's named. He's one of the two. And then in Zechariah 5, it goes through this whole presentation of where, and Zechariah is seeing the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
And he's asking questions about, this is what I'm seeing, what does it mean? And he's being told what it means. I haven't translated it yet. Dying to do so, but I've gone back to rewrite the terms volume of Yahshua because...
so what's the verse?
So it's Zechariah 5, the entire chapter.
Okay.
So it's something I want to translate because it speaks of this, and you might say, so why would you be doing that? Well, I shared with you and what a voice I heard had to say,
mm-hmm.
and I thought it was just kidding.
Mm-hmm.
And then I read in this speech that Solomon gives, it's probably the single most important time in the whole history of Israel. And he interrupts the speech in the middle of it to talk about this Nakri, and he specifically names him, and then he calls him a witness. And so you're saying, yikes.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about that. I'm not making any claims.
No, I understand.
But I think if God's going to make this bold a statement at that time, it's really important that we know what he said, and that we deal with what he said.
Yeah.
And so we'll do that. I don't know if we'll get to all of that next week or not. Probably not. But maybe we'll do that over the next 2 weeks, and then we'll return to the story of Moab.
Well, okay. Well, if it turns out that way, if you need a caddy, holla.
Yeah. I had. I'm not making any claim whatsoever. But should it occur, I do recognize that if you look at the story of Moshe, Moshe had his weaknesses. He like me, didn't articulate words very well, and I butcher particularly Hebrew pronunciations. I'm not good at it. I didn't want to do the radio part of it while I was content just writing. I still don't like doing the radio because of it. But Moshe had a single characteristic that God wanted to use. He knew the Egyptians. He knew the pharaohs. He knew their religion. Right. He knew their military. He knew their politics. He knew their economic schemes. He understood the plight of his people. So Yahowah could do this with Moshe without having to endure teaching him about all that was corrupt about the Egyptians.
No learning curve needed.
No learning curve needed. Let's just focus on the positive. Let's get our people out of there. He was prepared. When it comes to rebuking the religious and political during the time of Jacob's trouble, and I'm quite certain that I would not be nearly as good at discussing rabbinical Judaism as Eliyahu's going to be. I mean, if I am if that does refer to me and I'm there, and I don't know, honestly I don't know, then it would be fun watching him. I mean, I'd pay a very dear price just to have that opportunity to watch him. He's really funny. But when it comes to exposing and condemning the United States, Europe, Islam, which will be all over this, Christianity, socialist secular humanism, contrasting what they profess to what Yahweh says in his Torah, there's not much of a learning curve.
No. If not you, who?
So.
That's the same thing I said when you came up with the name and the children, I said, if not you, who?
Yeah. So, I'm not making the claim. I would like to know the answer.
We just talking.
Yeah, and we're going to go where the words lead. But I think that the words in Chronicles where Solomon gives this speech are so intriguing that it would be an injustice to what Yahweh conveyed if we don't take it seriously.
Absolutely. Well, that's exactly what he wants you to do. That's throughout the Torah. Shamar Torah, carefully examine, closely examine, carefully consider, think about, look at the words.
Yes. Yep.
Well,
so we're going to do that.
There wasn't a lot of help tonight, but I mean, you got all the stuff, and I was trying to keep up with you. I've been putting a computer, a laptop in front of me, so I could look up some things just as we go. But I two quick things before we leave. Philistine thing, that's obvious. I mean, you had said that earlier, many years ago. You said anything from
Sea peoples,
Greece or Greece, or at least the Crete.
Crete and, there wasn't much of a difference between the peoples and Crete, the Greek Isles, and Greece.
Yeah, that's right. They fanned out from a lot of places and so forth. So that's an easy connection. And
but
it's so obvious.
Just to read that the DNA expert says that Crete is the place that their DNA is derived from. And Yahweh specific said, "Oh, by the way, I'm bringing the Philistines from Crete." You go, okay.
Very good, yeah.
That's pretty smart. That's another one. But the reason I didn't send you this letter that was written is that this individual is really a one-off. They're not connected with the other conspiratorial nutcases that I'm aware of, and so there's probably less of a reverberation of what they had to say. And so I figured that all we would do is let's clarify these points, because obviously she got them wrong on homosexuality, on sexuality, and on what it is said, what Solomon said in this speech. And if she got them wrong, maybe there's others that I didn't communicate effectively and that have misconstrued what I've said because I was either didn't give complete or accurate information. So I thought it was worth going through these topics.
Oh, I think it was. I was kind of getting you're going mighty fast. So
I became more of a. But I didn't want to send you the letter. I'm not going to send anybody the letter, and I'm not going to mention the person's name. So it was really just strictly let's deal with the topics. There were 4 or 5 topics brought up. Let's deal with the topics to make certain that we're not miscommunicating to someone else that they're like, for example, I don't want someone to misconstrue why I call Paul a homosexual. It's not because I have anything against homosexuality. It's because he's a hypocrite, and it's because Yahweh calls him out on it, and because his whole issue was anti-circumcision, which is the sign of the covenant, and yet he circumcises Timothy. That's why I call him out on it. No other reason.
Yeah.
And it's right to do so.
Yes, indeed.
And it's important to this Christian view of one wife, and if you don't have married forever with one spouse, that you're somehow whore violating. That's the term she used to me. Whore violating Yahweh's intended message. Then what part of Abraham didn't you get? What part of Jacob did you miss? What part of Dode did you see? It's, if you're going to project your own ideas onto God, you darn well better make certain that they're consistent with what God had to say.
Mm-hmm.
And that prompted me to do something I just hadn't done. I needed to do it, but it's not in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and but actually to translate those passages. And the fact is that they can't be translated unless you do your homework. Search the words. So.
Well, I understand why you did it, and you did a very good job of it. I wish I could participate a little better, but in any case, next week, Zoroa, and
yeah, and I'll send you the chapter because what we'll do is we're going to pick up the story of the Zoroa with Yeshaya 40:10.
Okay.
We may have a little preamble as to how we got to Yeshaya 40:10. We'll pick it up with 40:10. And, I may even go back a little further because there's some really interesting things in Yeshaya 40. But we'll pick it up there, and then when we come to Zoroa, we'll say, all right, what does the word mean? Who does it apply to? And when I was doing it, I came to the conclusion that there are three Zoroa. Moshe.
Mm-hmm.
Dode.
Yosha and Dode, yeah.
And Yosha. There are three. And they're all manifest a slightly different aspect of the concept of Zoroa.
Sometime next week, maybe we can talk a little bit about the email that maybe I'll send you a little something on that. I don't seem to have an issue with a soul. Y'all created the soul. Can I pick up about a minute of your time before you go?
Sure. Can I just? I'm going to say the passage I think that speaks of the Philistine coming from Crete is 1 Chronicles 1:7 thereabouts, and it's the term he actually uses is Kaftor. Well, Kaftor is the original name for Crete. So if somebody wants to check that, I think it's 1 Chronicles 1:7 thereabouts, and he uses the term Kaftor, and Kaftor is the original name for Crete. Okay, now what do you want to say?
No, I was going to.
It's also let's see, it's also in Amos.
In Amos, okay.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to say I was going to weigh in for a few minutes on the.
Okay.
I'll send you a little note or something on the thing about Yosha's soul and why.
Oh yeah. We've there's been quite a debate on that, and
here's my question.
And let me just summarize it as to what the debate is that I've written in the past that it was Yosha's body without the spirit that became the Pesach lamb. And it was actually Yosha's spirit and body and soul collectively that suffered as the Pesach lamb. But the body that died and the body that was incinerated was the physical body of Yosha. The set-apart spirit had departed. That's why I cited, my God, whatever you've forsaken me, explaining what happened, which was a citation conclusion of the 22nd Psalm, Dode Psalm. And at that point, the soul went into Sheol. And it's my conclusion, and I'm not claiming to be right, I just think it's food for thought here, is that the soul was Yahweh's soul.
Yes.
And that the soul was Yosha's soul. But the soul wasn't, Yosha didn't have a distinct soul. He was not a distinct, unique individual. He wasn't the second person of the Babylonian Trinity. That Yahweh is one, and that he discusses having a soul for a specific purpose, and I think the purpose of his soul is when he wants to animate a physical being. And so Yosha's soul was Yahweh's soul, and therefore the soul was both Yosha's and Yahweh, because Yosha is Yahweh saving us. And so it was my conclusion that the soul that suffered matzah was Yahweh's. And then I'm challenged, and rightfully so, by some of the most dedicated covenant members, dedicated to really searching out the truth, is that, how can Yahweh's soul be exposed to Sheol, which is the place that Yahweh cannot go? And my conclusion there is that Yahweh's soul is, to Yahweh, is very similar to the mass of our soul compared to our physical bodies. Mm-hmm. It can't even be measured. And yet, for us, our soul is the essence of who we are. So it's really, really important to us, and yet if you compare it to the mass of our physical bodies, it's inconsequential. Now, Yahweh's power, his overall energy, is the speed of light times the speed of light times infinity 4 times over, greater than ours.
Gotcha.
And therefore, his soul is infinitely times infinity times infinity times infinity times the speed of light times the speed of light, less significant to him than our soul is to us as it relates to its mass.
Okay.
And that with Yahweh, so that gives you a little perspective, and that with Yahweh, while our soul is the essence of who we are, Yahweh's soul is simply an implement and an aspect of who he is. It's not unlike Yosha being a substantially diminished manifestation set apart from him. So Yahweh's soul would be less of all of who Yahweh is than even Yosha is. Mm-hmm. And so Yahweh's soul existed for that purpose. When Yahweh said, I'm going to provide the lamb to Abraham, he wasn't kidding.
No, that has to be the way it works for that.
Yes.
Yeah. But,
right. So that was my conclusion. And listen, we are physical, three-dimensional constructs trying to understand the nature of a seven-dimensional being. And this unique aspect for this one particular purpose of a seven-dimensional being. The mechanism to which Yahweh made this happen is beyond our grasp, but yet we seek to understand as much as we can. Mm-hmm. So this is just, me sharing my insights as to what I think may have happened, but yet as a three-dimensional being trying to understand the full ramifications of a seven-dimensional construct doing something that was extraordinarily wonderful. And
if he laid the sins of the family on him, on that soul, then
right.
It's no longer perfect. It's no longer Sabbath. So then it would have to be separated from Yah. So it qualifies to be in Sheol, and then it can be taken out later by for Bikurim. And cleansed, but so there's no reason to think it couldn't be. I always thought it was just a particular soul for that moment in time, regardless. I don't know that does he need another soul? Does he have to have that soul to be a diminished manifestation when he appeared the other 5 times or 6 times?
Yeah. Listen, when Yahweh's soul embodied Yosha, I don't think Yahweh was diminished by any material amount.
No, I would think not, based on those numbers.
Yep.
No. Okay.
When Yahweh sets apart the set-apart spirit to help counsel us, I don't think he is diminished in the seventh dimension by any material amount.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when Yahweh created the entire universe, that came from him, and I don't think he was diminished by any material amount.
No, that would make sense.
So this thing is true, but again, you know, there are lots of things that are interesting and important for us to talk about, and even disagree on, whereby we recognize that the mechanics of what's happening is really beyond our dimensional existence. And so to be dogmatic is foolish.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I'm presenting these ideas, I'm not trying to be dogmatic here. I'm just saying, this was my reasoning. These were my conclusions. I could be wrong. If you got a different idea, great. But these were my thoughts, and
sure.
And I had a number of people who kind of in the behind the scenes were debating this, and they shared their debate and their concerns, and I think it's worth further investigation. Yeah.
Well, I got a couple little ideas. Maybe they have merit or not, but I'll shoot them over to you later.
Okay. Yeah, please do. And as you know, the other two that have, and I just say challenged it would be unfair because they're not challenging it. They're seeking to understand it.
Oh, I know.
It was Jackie and Molly, and you know, they're two of the most active editors of the books over the years, and are, you know, extremely close and wonderful friends.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So.
Alrighty.
This is the kind of disagreement, and by the way, I don't even think we had a disagreement with the two of them. But should there have been a disagreement, it's the kind of disagreement that we would encourage.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one of the things that I came to conclude about our eternal existence in Shamayim, and one of the things I came to conclude, and it's just observing the full context of things. Why did Yahweh choose to reveal the most magnificent insights through a man that was so flawed, Dode?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, there's two purposes. One is to show that his purpose of his Torah is to perfect the imperfect, and Dode is the antidote for Pauline Christianity. Proves that the very essence of Pauline Christianity is a fraud. But the other reason, I think, is because God didn't want a family for us all to be the same. We're going to share the same values, but he doesn't want us to be the same. What fun would that be? If we were all just mirrors of Yahweh, and we all had the same attributes and attitudes and proclivities, how are you going to fill eternity with that? Boy, that would be boring.
Yeah. That's true.
You know, the last thing I would want, listen, we all seek to have relationships with people who share our values, but there's no synergy unless the aptitudes and proclivities and attitudes are also different.
Mm-hmm. Well,
otherwise, 1 + 1 = 1.
Yeah.
As opposed to 3. So I think part of the reason of the Dodes and the Moshes and the Abrahams is because they were interesting. Jacob, he's an interesting fellow. He's not perfect, but he's interesting.
No,
these are big personalities. And lastly, while we're on the same subject, this letter accused me of trying to position myself as more important than Abraham, because I said that, you know, he wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed.
Well, he's not.
And more important than Dode, because, you know, I pointed out some of his flaws. And that, you know, you ought not to even be comparing yourself to those people. If we don't compare ourselves and our relationship with Yah with the people that Yah was so close to and did such magnificent things with, and to try to figure out what it was about Noach that Yahweh liked. What was it about Dod that Yahweh loved? What is it about Moshe that Yahweh chose him even when he was so reluctant? What is it about these people? Because if you can figure out what it is that were their strengths and weaknesses and find out why Yahweh chose to use them in that spot, it can tell you what God enjoys, what he's looking for. And knowing that is really helpful. We ought to be comparing ourselves. We're not competing with them. You know, there's no bonuses for the things we accomplish on earth. I mean, the only guy that I'm aware that some would say, well, you know, he gets a huge bonus for what he did on earth would be Dod, and I wouldn't want his job for a million years. I mean, no way would I want his job. So, and he's the only one, really.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of us are just kids in Yah's family. No hierarchy. There's no, you know, if you're not doing this just because you love to learn and that you enjoy it, you ought not be doing it because there's no other reward.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And then in that light, we're not competing with somebody else when you say, you know, here's some characteristics of Abraham that show his weaknesses and his strengths, and let's try to understand why God chose a man with these weaknesses and these strengths to do these things. You know, what were Dod's weaknesses and strengths, and why did he use them in this way? What were Moshe's weaknesses and strengths? Why did he use them in that way?
Well, he told you all these things about him, and then he told you to Shema Torah. So obviously he wants you to look at it. So what's the, you know, there's your answer.
That's my, and you know, and if your goal is to compete with Abraham, Moshe, and Dod, you know, you're out of luck. You're just out of luck. That is a fool's folly and a waste of time. What you want to do is learn from them.
Yeah.
Right? Including, look how Yahweh worked around their weaknesses. There is no story in the Torah, prophets, or Psalms where the individual being talked about was perfect.
Otherwise, there'd be no reason for Pesach.
Right. They're real. Yah doesn't expect a lot of us. He's offering us a great deal, not expecting a lot of us.
You said it about 1 million times, and it's so comforting to me.
Yeah. And to me as well. Yep. My little dog here is being very rambunctious now. She says, "You have done this long enough." And I have listened patiently, and now it's time to play.
Okay, go play, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, all right, my friend. I took you 49 minutes beyond the length. I look forward to seeing your thoughts on the nefesh of Yahweh and of Yosha. And man, if you've got some insights that are different than what we just talked about here,
it's not
bring them on.
I think I just well, I'll show you. I'll tell you what I got, and whatever. So we'll go from there.
Okay.
All righty. Enjoyed it very much. Take care of yourself.
All right. I'm glad that Terry's doing well. Give my best to
Terry. And we all thrilled. So
yes.
See you later.
Yeah. See you later.